Welcome to the Nonprofits. For our third story this week, we go back to Texas for another edition of Churches Behaving Badly. Aaron Jensen, please give us the lowdown.
Well, deep in the heart of Texas, a Christian church reminds us all that churches and religion don't have to play by the same rules as everybody else. When a blind woman was denied access to church services because her service dog wasn't allowed, the church claimed it was because of a live band and flashing lights, which aren't appropriate for service dogs. You would think they'd leave that decision up to the dog's owner. Why does a church have a right to exclude when no one else does? This story is from The Friendly Atheist by Hemant Mehta on June 10th, 2024.
Excellent question there, Aaron. Why do they have special treatment there? Aaron, it seems like kind of a dick move on the part of the church here. What's your take on this?
Dick move? Yes, definitely a dick move. Is it because of but it's not illegal, because the ADA, the federal law that mandates people with service dogs get access to public services, doesn't apply to churches and religions.
Figure.
Seems really interesting. Now, I'm not sure why they excluded this dog here. I think this has more to do with just not being acceptable of service dogs and people that need them than it is about any kind of religious beliefs or anything like that. I believe if it had been in some other organization with the same people, just not religious, and they were allowed to exclude, they would have excluded the dog. But the fact that it was a church just helps us have a bigger discussion on the exceptions that churches get in our legal system and in our country, where they just don't have to follow or play by some of the same rules that other organizations do.
That doesn't seem right. I mean, they reap all the benefits, right, as being a nonprofit and all that good stuff. But then when it comes to treating people just like people, go figure, then they drop the ball there. Helen, you work with Recovering from Religion, and so I'm sure you hear lots of stories, often firsthand, of people that suffer at the hands of religion. Could you talk about some of the real harm that policies like this church has, that real harm that'll do?
Yeah. So the work that I do with Recovering from Religion, I've been with the organization for 3.5 years now. And the stories that I've heard of religious bigotry, not only against people of certain minority groups, but for people that are disabled and need some kind of secondary assistance, is widespread. And this is just a theory. My kind of feeling is that for a lot of churches, people with disabilities pose a problem. Because if you have this divine God, and God never makes mistakes, and God has created this perfect creation, and you have someone that, their eyes don't work so well and needs something of assistance, like a dog, that they use as their second set of eyes and are trained to help them, it is a visual representation a living representation of that reminder that their God may make mistakes. And this is just a theory, because it kind of reeks of that sort of thing, this ableism sort of idea, that I don't know how to feel about these people. These people make me uncomfortable. They're making me question things. So I don't want them to be a part of my community. Because I know that most people know that service dogs are trained to deal with all types of situations. They're trained to deal with flashing lights, loud noises, because they're trained to deal with these situations, because the blind person can't react the same way for those of us that have our eyesight. So the church knows that these seeing eye dogs are trained to deal with these situations. This just sounds to me like religious bigotry. This just sounds like othering. You do not represent what we want in this church, so we're going to find an excuse for you not to be a part of this community. This is what I got from the article. It might just be my personal opinion, but just from the stories I hear from RFR and the way that I know churches operate, because I do this show, I know what happens.
Are you saying that this kind of exclusion due to disabilities is common in churches?
I think it's more common than people think. There was another article that I read by a theist that was done on sojourners, and there is a lot of ableism in the church. Mm-hmm. And because they're privatized institutions, they are not required to have the facilities built and have the resources for people that do have disabilities, so they get access to churches. Mm-hmm. They're not going to make Bibles in Braille, for example, and it will not be given freely at the church. You are going to have to go and purchase your own Bible, that's in Braille, instead of it being readily available. So like, this is the type of thing, like, and I understand that, you don't think about it till it's a thing. But if you want people to feel included within the congregation, you have to assess for those potential problems that are going to come up, so they will be a part of the community. And this just reeks of privilege. We're only going to have the people that are able to like see as part of this congregation. Right. And because you have an A dog, that you can't be part of the community. This reeks of the separateness rather than the inclusion that the church so claims that they do.
Right. So it seems like that, like they're just either ignoring or committing some sort of disservice for this underserved population here. Jason, do you think that they're going to be doing? Are these churches doing themselves any good?
No. No, I mean, they're definitely shooting themselves in the foot. It's funny because I'm sad that this lady faced bigotry and was treated less than, by those who say that they worship a person who actually claimed to heal the blind. I can't help but feel maybe kind of a sick sense of satisfaction from reading this. And look, bear with me. She's getting to experience, the love of Christ, quote unquote, that so many of us have felt from Christian communities whenever they ostracized us and shunned us and maybe weren't so happy with the fact that, maybe our sexuality or our gender or whatever didn't align with their prescribed view, or even just the way we were living our lives. And the thing that's real interesting is not one person, obviously, from the congregation interceded for this woman. And she was just there to try to practice her, faith practice thing. She was turned away at the gate. And it's funny because if that isn't poetic, I don't know what is. I hope this experience will help her to evaluate, I don't know, what she expects from a church, from Christians, and honestly from her God. My fear is that, and it just seems to be pretty deep rooted in Christianity, is that she'll utilize this to like double down on her faith, like in Jesus, using this like a real common kind of excuse, like the quote, well, he was protecting me from bad people, rationalization. Right. I could, and it's funny because I get to see her next church capitalizing on the fact that they let her in. Right. While the others would not, thus verifying that this church is fucking full of the Holy Spirit, while those other ones were obviously not following the doctrine of Christ. I mean, because, and I think both Helen and Aaron hit on it, these are businesses and that are masquerading as not a business. So the fact that they don't have to provide any of this shit for people, to me, is already disgusting. And may possibly give people like a superiority, I shouldn't have to do, I do what I want type of complex. I don't know. It blows my mind that a blind person was turned away. Maybe it's just too exposing of how impotent their God really is, right? I mean, I don't know.
That and the church leaders too. I mean, maybe the little bit of the facade is coming down. Maybe we are getting a peek behind the curtain there, and we're seeing, we're seeing what really goes on, what really does motivate these people when they have these. Aaron, I want to jump back to you. I want to ask you two quick questions. Do you think that there's any kind of other reasoning? And they said they were concerned about the safety of the parishioners and the safety of the dog. Do you think that they maybe don't trust this woman? I mean, do you think that there's some kind of, maybe they think she's trying to pull a fast one just to bring her dog to church?
Yeah, I think the real problem is the dog. In my view, I think if she had shown up without a dog, I don't think she would have been excluded. She would have been more than invited to come in and have a good time. But the fact that she showed up with a dog is what the problem is. And I think this has to do. One of the problems is a lot of people out there that don't have trained service dogs claim that their dogs are trained service dogs and trained service dogs. Anybody can go out and get a vest that says that their dog is a trained service dog when they are not. And so all these people that are taking advantage of the law that says you don't have to require people provide proof that your dog is a service animal. Right. They're out there just saying my dog's a service animal and you can't ask for proof. You just have to accept my word for it. Well, those people that are doing that, they need to knock that the fuck off, because I think that's the root of the problem here, is that there are probably even people that do that with their dogs, and the dogs come in and they shit or they barf or they're not trained and they're just not well behaved. They're biting people. They're out of control because people think that they have well behaved dogs. And so our society is learning to not take service dogs seriously because of all these people that are masquerading their pets as service dogs. So
are you let me get this straight. Are you casting the church as a victim here? Is that what I hear you saying? Or
I'm casting the people that have truly trained service animals as the victims. That's who I'm casting. Okay. Because people can use their pets as faux service animals.
Right. Okay. So there's splash damage from the blowback against people that might be taking advantage of the opportunity.
Exactly.
So I think we all agree that this is really just bad form on the part of the church, but it doesn't appear that there's a lot of pushback against the church. I mean, we're talking about it here, but it didn't seem like, after reading the article, it didn't seem like anything happened. Aaron, does that surprise you?
Well, what surprises me is they didn't name the church in the article. Like, I went to this article and then I went to the original news story and watched the video on the original story, and in no place did they name the church. And I found that really interesting. Like, why wouldn't you name the church to kind of shame them in public for doing what they did and having to be held accountable? Like, that's the whole purpose of journalism, right? Is to hold the powerful accountable. And the fact that they didn't name the church demonstrates that there's a favoritism towards Christianity, especially where I think this was in Texas, right? This is a few hours outside of Houston. That there's a favoritism.
I don't think I'm going out on a limb saying Hemant Mehta is not going to be favoring the church here.
Yeah, and I don't know why they didn't. I don't know if they were not able to find the church, or why they didn't name the church, but they didn't. And I don't think that's right. I think if you're going to be open to the public, then you should be scrutinized in public as well, and not have to hide behind whatever policy or favoritism that got them unnamed in these pieces.
Right. If you're going to have the policy, then have the guts to stand up and say, hey, that's our policy, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Like, hey, we're not required to by law. Sorry.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. You'd think. I want to go over to Helen here. I got a question for you. Now, I know that the church is not claiming that this was a biblically based decision. They claim it was a safety-based decision, but I want to read 2 Bible verses for you. And we can talk about that. The first one is from Leviticus chapter 21. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. No man with a crippled foot or hand, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has an eye defect, or who has festering or running sores or damaged testicles. So that was one of the verses. Now here's another verse, also from Leviticus, 2 chapters earlier. Do not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Okay, so the first one, I believe, if I'm reading the context correctly, was specifically for clergy, but I think the message is quite clear, though, that there's some sort of that the disabled and people that are suffering from these illnesses are being looked down upon and are being lesser. Before you were talking about lesser than, or the them, or you're being separate. But then the other verse kind of says the opposite, says that we should help them, we should hold them up. Is this an example of the great book of multiple choice? Is the church's policy anti-Bible or pro-Bible, or is it just bigotry, plain and simple?
I want to point out that back when the ADA was, the American Disability Act was passed back in 1990, some religious mofo, oh, sorry, the 1980s, I apologize, by the name of William Bentley Ball, representing the Association of Christian Schools International, lobbied against the ADA for two reasons: the cost of making schools accessible and concerns about government intrusion into religious institutions. Religious exercise within the meaning of the First Amendment will be directly involved if churches and religious schools are not expressly exempted from the terms of the ADA. He wrote in a letter back dated July 13, 1989. So he wrote this to the White House. So this is an example of decades long, of the church basically saying, we don't want, if we allow the ADA to put ramps in our churches to allow people that are in wheelchairs, that have some need some physical assistance of getting to the church, that is basically like allowing the state into the church, that they don't have to follow under the ADA laws. Now, I do agree that the church is a public institution. We all know this. We have a separation, of church and government in the country, and we're big supporters of that shit. But not the cost of people, because regardless, those of us, that are on this panel don't like religion. We live in the 21st century. It should go by the wayside. But there are people in this country that are going to continue to practice. And a lot of those people are people that need that assistance. And, the disabled people didn't leave the church. They were never welcome, because when you have people actively fighting against them to have the ability to have access to these spaces where they find their community, where they have friends and family that attend these services, and it's a big part of their lives. When you say, I'm sorry, you can't see well, and we're going to use your dog as an excuse to not allow you to be a part of the community, then that they're just emphasizing that they really don't care what the Bible says. And the two verses that you just read emphasize how they want it both ways. They want to be seen as beacons of welcoming, but at the same time talking out the other side of their mouths, where they're saying, yeah, but you're not worthy enough to be seen by the Lord. And it's just that hypocrisy that happens over and over again in religion.
Right. I think we see that a lot. We see when we look at a religion, or in this case, a church, or I suppose more specifically to the church leaders, although Aaron did point out that nobody, or maybe it was Jason, that nobody stood up. Nobody said anything on behalf of these people. And so, but we see that it's really just a mirror to those people. I mean, it's, we can see you. We can see you, people. You're showing your true stripes here. It's and I agree with you, Helen. I think I think the Bible is irrelevant here to them. I think they're not. I don't think they're trying to do what's holiest or what's best or what's most godlike or what's most whatever. I think they're just trying to do whatever makes them feel comfortable and looking for excuses to try to justify that. Oh, it's because of the safety. Well, safety is not an issue. Oh, well, in that case, we're worried about health codes, or we're worried about, having to clean up, or we're worried about, who knows what, right? And so I think you make a great point there, Helen, about, it's really just, and I agree. It's just plain bigotry. Plain and simple. Jason, I wanted to ask you a question. You were on the nonprofits with me a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about how the Texas governor was pushing school waivers as a way to redirect public money into private schools. So is this story a warning sign for how religious schools could legally discriminate while accepting public money? We see that religion in the public sphere is given a lot of leeway and allowed to discriminate in places where normally that would not be. If this had happened like in a famous footwear or something like that, then there'd be lawsuits, right? And so religion is given a certain leeway. Is this a warning sign against that kind of redirecting that public money into religious organizations?
Well, I mean, we already, Helen kind of already hit on that this has been a thing that they've already kind of said is a thing. Like, hey, even you telling me to put a ramp in my school that may actually have kids with disabilities attend it, yeah, you can't tell me, so fuck you, you're the government, you can't tell me shit. What I think we're going to see, and what we have seen and what we're going to continue seeing, is an increase in the audacity of people who are more on the far right, people who would turn away somebody with a service animal. One thing I wanted to bring up is that a lot of people, they go, oh, service animal, leftist, blah, 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 snowflake, these are service animal. The idea of a service animal has been also tied into an idea of wokeism, of people with, mental health issues. These are all things that are like looked down upon or are considered part of the woke liberal agenda by people on the right. So kind of to hit on what Aaron was saying, but to more expound on it. Yeah. They're like, yeah, it's probably not a service dog, but it's like, yeah, it's probably not a service dog. It's another one of those needy leftist liberal, can't, they're afraid of fireworks, and, well, we need more guns. You hear this type of rhetoric thrown around. So it makes me think about that. So and we've seen an increase in the audacity of fundamentalist conservatives and the shit that actually comes out of their mouth and their behavior. So yes, it may be another sign of just the audacity of people just really showing who they truly are and not hiding behind the guise of morality that was so prevalent in the 80s and 90s. Now people are a lot more audacious and seem to be acting a lot more immoral in general.
Right. Aaron, let's wrap up with you. I'm going to give you just a quick question. I want a quick answer because this will be a very easy question to answer in like 5 words. But what do you think we can do to make the government realize that there's real harm here, and that if we allow these religious exemptions to these policies, that we're harming Americans, we're harming people? What can we do? How can we spin this? How can we approach this in such a way that that the people making the rules will wake up?
You have to call them up and if they're not, and tell them what you want. And if they don't do it, you have to vote for someone that will do what you want them to do. That's the only power we have is in the voting booth. All
right. So we'll end on that note. Thank everyone for talking about this, and thank all of you for watching. And if you want more nonprofits, then click these links.